Hi everyone, and welcome to this series of lectures on critical thinking. My name is Omer Farooq, and I'm the Social Sciences Librarian at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. In this series, I will be introducing you to the concept of critical thinking. We will explore together what are some of the key skills associated with critical thinking, standards you can apply in different situations that will help you learn this important skill, and important benefits of using these skills in both work, school, and life situations. And finally, I will have some exercises for you to practice these skills. Let's first start by asking ourselves, what is thinking? The idea about asking about something. Why is the sky blue? What jobs am I qualified for? Where do I need to go to find information on my topic? How is climate change affecting agriculture around the world? What do I know about this topic? All these questions offer you or allow you to use your mind or consider or reason about something. Some of these questions come up daily in our lives as we encounter information, ideas, and topics that we are interested in, or things that we need to learn in school or at work with these questions in mind. If we were to look for answers to these, we could come up with a pretty good definition of thinking and say that thinking is purposeful, organized process that we use to make sense of the world. There is purpose involved in this organized process, and we are using this process to answer something we need to understand or make sense of. So as you start asking questions and look for answers, you are in fact thinking. There are different types of thinking, and you may have heard of some of these in casual conversations. Terms like creative thinking, problem solving, decision making, analyzing, evaluating, and reasoning. All these terms fall under the category of critical thinking because when you're involved in any of creative process like writing, engaged in visual art and performing arts, working on a math problem, deciding how much money you need to save for a trip, estimating the time it would take you to complete your homework, and arguing your points in an essay or a research assignment, all of these are examples of critical thinking. Based on our understanding of thinking so far as purposeful and organized process that includes a variety of skills, we can now come up with a pretty good definition of critical thinking as a process of gathering and assessing information in a logical and balanced way to reach conclusions justified by reasoned arguments based on available evidence. We will build on this definition and look more closely at these skills individually and what we can do to integrate these skills effectively into what we do, how we make decisions at work and in our personal lives. But at this point, it is important for us to understand that critical thinking involves a variety of skills, and since these are skills, we can enhance these skills with practice. As we mentioned, critical thinking involves many different skills. We may not use all these skills in everything we do in life or for school or for work or in our personal encounters with finding information and making decisions based on the information we gather, but critical thinking almost always involves effectively identifying, analyzing, evaluating arguments. As you read an article on your topic, think about what are the main arguments. Examine it to see if there are different arguments presented in the article. Does the article seem one-sided? In other words, does the author present a well-rounded perspective on the topic, or does it seem that other possible arguments or perspectives can be presented on the topic as well? Ask yourself, what are my personal prejudices and biases on this topic? Do you agree or disagree with the information? And can you formulate and present convincing reasons in support of conclusions? If you need to come up with a reasonable, intelligent decision about what to believe and what to do after reading the information, in the next lecture, we will examine these skills specifically and see how these can be applied in different situations. In this lecture, we will learn about the universal standards which must be applied to our thinking before we can call our thinking or process to be critical. To think critically requires command of these standards. There are two key ingredients that turn ordinary thinking into critical thinking. The first key ingredient is that critical thinking is reflective thinking, which means that it involves thinking about one's thinking. The second key ingredient is that critical thinking is done well. Thinking done well meets high standards of reasoning. Universal intellectual standards are standards which, when applied to thinking, provides a means of checking the quality of reasoning about a problem, issue, situation, or question. Thinking critically entails knowledge and application of these standards. The universal critical thinking standards include clarity, accuracy, precision, relevance, depth, breadth, logic, significance, and fairness. We will learn about each of these standards in which we can include them into our thinking process by asking appropriate questions. Clarity. One way to improve your thinking is to CI a concept, idea, or topic. CI stands for state, elaborate, exemplify, illustrate. If something is not clear, we could ask questions like, could you elaborate further? Could you give me an example? Could you illustrate what you mean? These questions will help us clarify a concept, idea, or a topic. Clarity is a gateway standard. If a statement is unclear, we cannot determine whether it is accurate or relevant. In fact, we cannot tell anything about it because we don't know what it is saying. For example, the question, what can be done about the education system in America, is a little unclear. In order to adequately address the question, we would need to have a clearer understanding of what the person asking the question is considering the problem to be. A clearer question might be, what can educators do to ensure that students learn the skills and abilities which help them function successfully on the job and in their daily decision making? A statement can be clear but not accurate, as in, most dogs weigh 300 pounds. To be accurate is to represent something in agreement with the way it actually is. People often present or describe things or events in a way that is not the way things actually are. The questions we can ask then are, how could we check on that? How could we find out if that is true? How could we verify or test that? A statement can be both clear and accurate, but not precise, as in, Jack is overweight. Here we don't know how overweight Jack is, 1 pound or 500 pounds. To be precise is to give details necessary to someone to understand exactly what is meant. Some situations don't call for details. On the other hand, in many cases, specifics are important to good thinking. The questions we can ask then are, could you give more details? Could you be more specific? Could you be more exact? Statement can be clear, accurate, and precise, but not relevant to the question at issue. For example, students often think of the amount of effort they put into a course should contribute to raising their grade in the course. Often, however, effort does not measure the quality of student learning and therefore is irrelevant to the grade. Something is relevant when it is directly connected with and bears upon the issue at hand. The questions we can ask then are, how does that relate to this problem, issue, topic, or concept? How does that bear on the question? How does that help us understand the issue? A statement can be clear, accurate, precise, relevant, but superficial, lack depth. We think deeply when we get below the surface of an issue or problem, identify the complexities inherent in it, and deal with those complexities in an intelligent and responsible way. Even when we think deeply, even when we deal with the complexities of the questions, we might find the question difficult to address. Still, our thinking will work better for us when we recognize the complicated questions and address each area of complexity in the question. When we come across a difficult concept, issue, or topic, we can ask questions like, what factors make this a difficult problem? What are some of the complexities of this question? What are some of the difficulties we need to deal with? A line of reasoning may be clear, accurate, precise, relevant, and deep, but lack breadth, but fail to consider all relevant viewpoints. For example, loud music annoys you and you live in a dorm with someone who likes to play loud music. The question is, should my roommate play loud music when I'm in the room? Both points of view, yours and your roommate's, are relevant. You may realize that imposing your preference on your roommate is inconsiderate and unfair. If you don't consider your roommate's point of view, your behavior becomes self-serving. One of the primary mechanisms the mind uses to avoid giving up what it wants is to refuse to consider viewpoints that differ from its own. To fully consider the breadth of a statement, issue, or topic, we can ask, do we need to look at it from different perspective? Do we need to consider another point of view? Do we need to look at this in other ways? Thinking brings together a variety of thoughts in some order. When we combine thoughts are mutually supporting and make sense in combination, thinking is logical. Let's think about this as an example. A teacher knows that looking at standardized tests of students in schools and the actual work they produce, that students are often deficient in basic academic skills such as reading, writing, speaking, and the core disciplines such as math, history, and science. Now, despite this evidence, teachers are frequently concluding that they don't need to change their instruction to improve student learning. And in fact, nothing is wrong with the way they are fundamentally teaching. Given the evidence that is the conclusion logical? Does the conclusion logically follow from the facts? If we were to address this issue, we could start by asking questions like, does this follow from what I said before? Does this all make sense together? Does this contradict? A previous statement, again, for our thinking to be logical, our thoughts need to be mutually supporting and need to make sense together. Significance. So when we reason through issues, we want to concentrate on the most important or most relevant information and take into consideration the most important concepts. In college, for example, few students focus on important questions like, what does it mean to be an educated person? What do I need to do to become educated? Instead, students tend to ask questions like, what do I need to get an A in the course? How many pages does this paper have to be? What do I have to do to satisfy this professor? To get to the significance of any topic, we should ask, is this the most important problem to consider? Is this the central idea to focus on? Which of these facts are more important? And fairness. When we think through a problem, we want to make sure our thinking is justified. To be justified is to think fairly in context and with reason. Let's say two students live in the same dorm room. One is cold and the other is hot. The hot student likes to keep the windows open during winter. The hot students insisted that it was too uncomfortable with the windows closed. Her reasoning centered only on her point of view, that she was hot and could not function well. If her roommate were cold, she could put on a sweater. We do not naturally consider the rights and needs of others on the same level as our own rights and needs. But to be a good thinker, we need to apply fairness in our thinking. In the next lecture, we will explore the benefits of critical thinking, barriers to critical thinking, and the characteristics of critical thinkers. In this lecture, we will look at some advantages of critical thinking at work, in your personal life, and in making important decisions that impact society at large. We will also learn from factors that stop people from thinking critically. And finally, we will explore some shared characteristics of critical thinkers and how we can all learn these skills if we practice them in our lives. More and more employers are looking for employees that have specialized academic skills, but also good communication and thinking skills, who can learn quickly and solve problems and gather and analyze information efficiently and effectively. In other words, employees are information literate in the broadest sense of the term, who can identify when information is needed, locate specific information from most relevant resources, and use this information effectively and efficiently to solve problems. This has become a vital skill in any profession. Practicing critical thinking in daily life is not separate from practicing at work or school. These skills are transferable, and if we practice them enough, they become second nature and help us avoid making foolish decisions. Critical thinking also helps us become good citizens, capable of making good decisions on important social, political, and economic issues. In addition, these skills help us in developing good thinking so we can examine our own assumptions and biases and make our communities more just and equitable. So you might ask, if critical thinking is so important, then why is uncritical thinking so common? Why is it that so many people, including the highly educated and intellectual people, find it difficult to think critically? These are important but complex questions, but we can identify some common barriers to critical thinking. For example, egocentrism or self-centered, or making self as the center of attention, sociocentrism or group-centered or group interest thinking, which assumes that one's group is more superior or righteous, unwarranted assumptions, belief that something is true without having proper evidence or justification, wishful thinking, believing something is true because one wishes it to be true, and relativism, thinking truth is just a matter of opinion. Now that we have explored some of the barriers to critical thinking or factors that stop people from critical thinking, let's look at some characteristics of critical thinkers. Folks who are lifelong learners and practice critical thinking are honest with themselves. They regard problems as exciting challenges, strive for understanding, and are curious and patient with complex issues. Critical thinkers base their judgments on evidence rather than personal preferences, and are interested in other people's ideas and are willing to listen attentively. They practice fair-mindedness and seek a balanced point of view, and practice restraint, controlling their feelings rather than being controlled by them. In this lecture, we will learn how we can put some of the critical thinking skills and standards that we learned earlier to practice. You can work through these exercises at your own pace. Revisit the earlier lectures if you need to see what skills and standards you're applying in these exercises. The goal of these exercises is to give you an opportunity to practice and develop your critical thinking skills, so you can encounter new information, ideas, topics, and issues on your own in school or in your personal life, and you can apply these skills yourself. In this exercise, let's understand the difference between opinions and facts. Authors often express their opinions based on their interpretation of events. Facts can be confirmed through other sources. Oftentimes, opinions are based on facts, and that's not always the case. So, for this exercise, let's write down two statements from a recent news article that discusses a current event that you can identify as opinion expressed by the author, and two statements that you can identify as facts. For this exercise, find an article on a topic of your interest. Read the article carefully and ask yourself, who is responsible for the content and what are their qualifications? Google the author and see if they have other books and articles about the topic. If they are a professor or a subject related to the topic or affiliated with a recognized corporation, institution, or group in the field, or employed in a capacity related to the subject matter. So we learned quite a lot of different terms and concepts in this series of lectures. From what we've discussed in previous lectures, can you identify three concepts that you learned in previous lectures and ask yourself, how are these concepts related? How are these concepts different? And then describe two scenarios when you applied these concepts in practical situations in the past. These situations can be about school, work, or your personal life. In this exercise, let's look closely at the concept of expertise. We are all experts at something. It may be running, playing a sport, or a video game, playing an instrument, or a craft. It takes time to develop expertise. Describe something you consider yourself an expert of. How long did it take you to develop this current level of expertise? What resources do you consult to learn new things about this interest or hobby? How would you evaluate someone who claims to be an expert in it? We all have preferences in terms of how we learn about what's happening in the world. Some of us prefer to get our news through local and national news networks, through cable, while some of us prefer newspaper websites or social media outlets. Think of a recent event and search the internet and news articles related to that event. Pick three different news platforms like Fox News, CNN, NPR, New York Times, or Washington Post. Compare these three news outlets to see how they have covered the same issue or event. Ask yourself, are they unbiased in their reporting? Does the reporting of the event emphasize opinions over facts? If you find opinions on the event, are they based on facts? Would you trust this news source? And this concludes our 4-part lecture series on critical thinking. I hope you found this introduction helpful in understanding the fundamentals of critical thinking, and you can practice and utilize these skills in your schoolwork and personal life to become a lifelong learner and a critical thinker. Thank you and best wishes to you all.